Hello and welcome back. I'm Rachel. You're watching Kalkine TV live from Sydney. This is the Economic Corner show where we update you on all the biggest global economic announcements. The first and the biggest economic update for the day, which has been impacting markets across the globe, is the US inflation. US inflation rose 4.2% in April over its level a year ago, fueling concerns that the world's largest economy is overheating. Headline inflation jumped 0.8% month on month, while the core component rose 0.9%. This is the highest headline month-on-month reading since September 2009 and the highest core reading since 1981. It leaves the annual rates of inflation at 4.2% and 3% respectively. The details show used car prices were the big surprise, jumping 10% month-on-month, while new vehicle prices rose 0.5%. This potentially offers more evidence of the supply disruptions in the sector. The economic reopening frictions are evident elsewhere, with recreation prices up 0.9%, commodities up 1.1%, food is up 0.4%, and education and apparel both up 0.3% month on month. Now, Americans are already paying more for their daily expenses. The latest consumer price index data couldn't have come at a worse time for people already battling a raft of challenges, from energy shortage, COVID, manufacturing logjams, to supply disruptions. The US Consumer Price Index climbed 4.2% in April, the fastest annual pace since 2008. While inflation may seem normal in recovery, its persistent rise may impact the broader economy. The weakening currency will add more pressure on the markets and also on the government. Higher inflation means higher government expenditures. The Biden administration has announced massive outlays in various developmental projects and also in social security programs. That's including trillions of dollars in COVID-related stimulus packages. Still, these expenses could go up in the coming days. Economists have warned if inflation persists, the situation could get worse. Moving on now from the concerning inflation numbers to news that comes as a sigh of relief. The Colonial Pipeline resumed operations on Wednesday after being shut due to a cyber attack. Petroleum supplies have begun reaching eastern US states 5 days after the attack caused a shutdown that precipitated a run on fuel at petrol stations. The 5,500-mile pipeline system has capacity for 2.5 million barrels a day of fuel and is critical as it delivers liquid fuels from oil refineries to states all along the US eastern seaboard. It was shut last Friday after what the FBI said was a ransomware attack by a hacking group called the Dark Side. The shutdown pushed average US petrol prices above $3 a gallon on Wednesday, their highest level since 2014. Next up, an expert review committee by the Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Response, commissioned by the World Health Organization, made a critical statement on the pandemic. The panel released a report that said a swift international response could have stopped the 2019 COVID-19 outbreak in China, becoming a global catastrophe back in 2020. Though the panel's review does not examine the origins of SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, but it criticizes the Chinese authorities and the World Health Organization for being too slow to recognize that the virus was spreading between people in Wuhan, and then to warn the world about human-to-human transmission. The panel has recommended setting up a Global Health Threats Council. The Council will give more power for the World Health Organization to investigate and also to publish information about disease outbreaks without government approval. It also suggested new funding for an international pandemic financing facility that could spend up to $5 billion to $10 billion a year on preparedness and call on $50 billion to $100 billion in an emergency. Moving on now to another update, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has announced that she will lead a trade and promotional delegation to Australia in early July, which will be New Zealand's first since COVID-19 hit. Ardern made a pre-budget speech called Reconnecting to the World, discussing the border, trade, immigration and also child poverty. She said the July trip would aim to further strengthen business ties with the Trans-Tasman partners. The following month, Trade Minister Damien O'Connor will travel to London and also to Brussels to discuss negotiations for New Zealand's free trade agreements with the UK and the EU. Now let's move on to some important economic data announcements. The European Commission has raised its economic forecasts for the coming 2 years. Brussels is now predicting that the euro area will expand by 4.3% this year and then 4.4% in 2022. That's compared with previous forecasts for a 3.8% growth in both years. The stronger outlook was driven by the rising vaccination rates and also the prospect of lockdowns easing across the regions, as well as improving export demand driven by a global rebound. Meanwhile, the UK economy contracted just 1.5% in the first 3 months of the year, after growth exceeded expectations in February and March. The Office for National Statistics said that Britain's exports and also their imports continued to recover in March. However, there was a pattern of less trade with the European Union. That was following the imposition of greater border restrictions after the end of the Brexit transition period back in January. Lastly, moving on now to important upcoming economic events and announcements that investors will be closely watching for the day. US President Joe Biden is due to host a group of Republican senators at the White House today. US initial job loss claim numbers will also be released later today. From the earnings front, Alibaba will be announcing its results today. Now that's all from me so far today. Keep up to date with Kalkine TV Live for latest news and market movements. I'm Rachel signing off for Kalkine TV.